Hi, my name is Clarence. I run a lead generation agency that brings in over $35,000 in profit each month. But there's even a kicker. I don't spend hours grinding away at my desk to make this happen. Instead, I've built an automated system using N8n that finds warm leads, personalizes outreach, and books clients for me at scale. In today's video, I'm going to pull back the curtain and show you exactly how this system works and how you can use it to transform your business too. Let me start with a question. Have you ever felt like finding quality leads is one of the hardest parts of growing your business? Well, you're definitely not alone. Like many businesses waste hours, even weeks, chasing cold prospects who were never really interested in their services to begin with. Traditional methods like blasting generic emails to massive lists just don't work anymore. I'm not sure if they've ever worked. However, they're time-consuming, inefficient, and let's face it, they often lead to dismal results. I've been there, but the good news is there's a much smarter way to do things. What I've noticed is that a lot of people approach lead generation all wrong. They'll target very generic and they'll target prospects based on service level metrics like job titles or company size. For example, they might decide to reach out to all marketing directors at companies with over 500 employees. You might be wondering, well, what's wrong with that? Well, the problem is that this approach doesn't take into account whether these businesses actually need your services. Meaning you end up spending time and resources on people who don't even know they have a problem, or worse, aren't interested in solving it. So, of course, you're wondering, well, how do I fix this? Well, you fix this by flipping the script. So instead of a wide net, focus on companies that are already showing signs of a specific need. I'll show you what I mean. If you run a sales agency, just like I do, don't just target decision makers, but target businesses that are actively hiring for sales development representatives, like SDRs, because you know they're on the lookout to expand their sales team. Why do this? Well, because companies investing in these roles are clearly focused on improving their sales process. They're much more likely to see value in what you offer. It's all about identifying pain points. Like for instance, a company hiring an SEO specialist is likely struggling with website performance. The same goes for a business looking for a new CTO. They may have technical infrastructure challenges, which if that's what you solve, that's a perfect time to step in. By focusing on these signals like job postings on LinkedIn or Indeed, you can tailor your outreach to address their specific needs. This makes your message not just relevant, but it makes it irresistible. Okay, you guys probably have had enough of me rambling. Let's dive into the workflow. What you can see on screen is a workflow that I've personally used to this day to get me quite a lot of clients because, as I said, I'm targeting pain points. I'm targeting people who are actively looking to make a change, who are actively looking to hire people to do the things that I can do for them. So that's the perfect time to step in. The workflow is quite long. That's because there are some tricky parts. That's why I've tried to break it down into 5 different segments. So first, we'll scrape companies who are actively hiring for certain roles. Well, in this case, I'm using SDRs as an example. Then we'll have to find their email address because that isn't part of the job application. We'll have to enrich the lead, use AI to personalize, and then lastly, write an email and send the email. Let's start at the beginning. We scrape for companies hiring for SDRs. We scrape LinkedIn, because LinkedIn is one of the platforms, just like Indeed, where most companies post job applications if they have some. But as you can see, there are 3,000 in the United States looking for an SDR, so plenty of people for us to reach out to. Problem with doing this manually is that's going to be very time consuming. That's why we made this part of the automation to scrape the list of companies and jobs you just saw. I use a scraper, which can be found on Apify. For those who aren't familiar, Apify is a giant marketplace for scrapers. You've seen a video of me using it for an Apollo scraper, but you can also have an Instagram scraper, Facebook post scraper, Stereo scraper, G2 scraper, Crunchbase scraper, you name it, it's probably on here. So how to get the scraper to work is actually quite simple. It should have only taken 2 nodes, which is this HTTP node, which is set to post, and this one, which is set to get. But there are some other things I had to add to this flow to make it work without any manual input. I'll get to that in a second. First, let me show you how you can actually trigger the scraper. To trigger the scraper, we use an API. For those who aren't familiar, an API is simply like a bridge between 2 systems, which lets one system, which is our automation, talk with another one, which is the scraper. For that, all we need is a URL. You can find this URL on in the Apify API documentation. It's very straightforward, so I won't go over it in any detail. A thing to note is that what you see here, I'll highlight it for you, is the ID of the scraper. So each scraper has their own ID, of course, and this just tells the Apify API which actor it has to communicate with. So once you've sent the trigger to the scraper to start running, all we have to do is retrieve the data set. For that, we use a variable, which is also an ID. You can see it's this number. It's a variable because each run of the scraper you do, the data set ID is going to be different. So it needs to be a variable. You can see that only on the first and second run, there was no information to be outputted, meaning data wasn't ready yet. Only the third run, there actually was some. So once this HTTP node is done, which literally takes a split second because all it has to do is send a trigger to a URL, this node is immediately activated and is told to retrieve the data. But 9 out of 10 times, the data isn't going to be ready in a split second because the scraper needs to start running and needs to finish, which can take a while depending on what you're asking from it. That's why these 4 nodes here are in place. So as I just showed, inside of this HTTP node, you could see that the first 2 runs were duds. So if that's the case, this code node just checks if there's an output. If there isn't one, it'll send out not ready. As you can see, the status is not ready. Then it goes to this if node, which checks if not ready is present. Well, if it isn't present, it's told to wait and then rerun the flow until there's actually some data to be retrieved and we can continue on. In this case, you can see it took 2 rounds or 3 tries actually before the data was ready. So now you know why, even though triggering an API and retrieving the data is very straightforward, there were some necessary additions to this part of the flow, which also concludes the first section. Don't worry, the other ones won't take as long. Now we need to find the email address. We find the email address by using some very useful software called AnyMailFinder. AnyMailFinder is accessible also through an API, which is why we can link it to our workflow. What AnyMailFinder does is, based on a domain, it can find email addresses which are linked to that domain. So since we don't have the email address of the person who posted the job application on LinkedIn, we'll have to just do a domain search and find all email addresses linked to that company. Let me quickly show you what we actually did retrieve, because that's what I forgot just now. So here you can see the data set and what it contained. I'll show you in a schema so it's clearer for everyone. So we have the post ID of the application when it was published. In this case, the salary isn't present. We see the company name. We also have the company URL, which isn't the URL to the company website, but this is the URL to the company LinkedIn page because, well, the job was posted on LinkedIn. And then lastly here it says poster full name. In some cases there is a name actually here, but in most cases I would say 9 out of 10 times there isn't a poster full name. I think that's due to privacy reasons or just because it isn't required. And the poster full name not being present just makes our job a little bit more difficult, but it's still doable, and I'll show you how. So now you actually know what was retrieved by the scraper from the LinkedIn job post, which brings us on to finding the email address. Well, to find the email address and to trigger the API, as I just showed, we need a domain. We haven't found the domain yet because it wasn't part of the retrieved information. So we have to scrape the company LinkedIn profile to find a domain. How we do that is by using also a HTTP node. This HTTP node gets the company LinkedIn profile HTML. So it's just, I took this from the left and pasted it over there, and it retrieved us the HTML. As always, we want to clean this because this contains a lot of code and a lot of unnecessary stuff, which just increases the amount of input tokens into the LLM, which is something we don't want. That's why this code is present. All this code does is filter out HTML. As you can see on the left side, it was very dirty, as I like to call it. And on the right side, all that remains is plain text, readable for us and also easier for the LLM. Then somewhere on the page, so somewhere within this line of text, there isn't really, somewhere in here, there is the domain name and the URL of the company. So what I've done is I've written a prompt to kind of analyze this text and based on the company name, find me the most likely URL. The prompt is very straightforward. Based on the provided LinkedIn content, identify the company name and locate the website URL. Only output the URL. As input, we've given it the plain text from the left side and dragged it in once again. And you can see on the right side, the output side, that it has found for us the URL to the company homepage, which we can not only use to enrich, but we actually need to find email addresses linked to this domain. So as I mentioned before, in some cases, the LinkedIn application is present. In most cases, it isn't. If it is present, it just makes your life a bit easier because you can do a more specific search using AnyMailFinder. If it isn't present, all we have to work with is the domain. So what we do is we take the domain, which was hedge.com, which was the result from the large language model. You can see over here, input it, and it returns us all of the email addresses which are linked to or are using this domain. You can see the entire list. There's a total of 8,000. Now that we've found all of these email addresses, that kind of concludes the second part, and all that's left is to enrich the lead. So give the large language model some information about the company, write a little personalization and clean up the company name if necessary. And then lastly, send an email to the person. How do we enrich the lead? Well, we enrich the lead with the only information we have at this point, which is their website URL. So we fetch all of the HTML this time instead of from the LinkedIn profile page. We do this from the company website, from their homepage. This is the same code as I've inputted over here. It just filters the HTML and returns plain text, as you can see. So this is what's on their homepage. For analyzing the homepage, I just use ChatGPT 4.0 mini. I think it's more than capable and it's very inexpensive. People have told me about DeepSeek, but I haven't had the time to experiment with it. This is a very generic prompt I wrote with the assistance of ChatGPT, but you can use this as a foundation because it works perfectly fine. And then onto the questions that I'm asking it to answer. So I'm asking it to extract and organize the following information: testimonials, recent growth, and success stories. And on the right side, you can see what the output is. Well, apparently there were no testimonials on the homepage. There was some recent growth and there were some success stories, which is more than enough for us to write a personalization, which we can use as the email opener. And then once again, as input, as I probably already mentioned, I plain text from the left. So you might be wondering, why are you cleaning the company name and what does that mean? Well, in some cases, the job application post on LinkedIn contains the company name, which is like followed by limited or by Inc., for example, how they're registered. The thing is, you never want to use that in a cold email because it doesn't sound human at all. I would never reference to a company saying Tesla Inc., for example. That's why we use this. Well, in this case, Hatch was already cleaned, but if that isn't the case, it would just take it out. So let's say LLC was present or Inc. was present or limited, as I just said, it would just clean the company name. So we can use a clean version of it in the email. And then we're on to the second to last large language model. Why do we need to get the first name? Well, if you remember back to where we found the email addresses contained a first name, a last name, and a domain name. We want to give the large language model the easiest job possible to make its output as consistent as possible. That's why we need this extra step to take what we just got. So we take the entire email address, which is once again input from the left side, which this variable actually translates into this. And we just ask it to return the first name if it's present. If it isn't, leave the field empty, because you'd rather say hi to someone than say hi at whatever, because then you already know they're not going to respond to your email. And you can see the output is Stuart, because his email address was stuart.mciver. So this was a very easy cleanup. Which brings us on to writing the email. Well, writing the email might be giving it a bit more credit than it deserves, because I always just tell the LLM to fill in a pre-written template. Why do I choose to pre-write an email template instead of let ChatGPT write everything? That's because, in my opinion, ChatGPT or Claude or whatever you use isn't good enough to write an entire email. That's a pretty big part of it. The other part of it is that if you're doing cold outbound, if you're doing cold emailing, or if you're doing any outreach as a business, you constantly want to improve. And how do you improve? You improve by switching up variables. Well, if you constantly let the LLM write the entire email, you can be sure that each and every email is going to be completely different from the one before. So there aren't really any metrics to test because there aren't any consistencies between the emails. So you can't really test your offer. You can't test the layout because you have no say over it because the LLM is filling that in for you. That's why we want to take away that power of the LLM, keep it to ourselves, and just let it fill in the variables or let it fill in the blanks, which it is really good at. So before I go over the conclusion of this entire workflow, let me show you what the input was. So the input was the first name, the company name, and the result. The result is simply what we extracted from the homepage. And here is the prompt. As I already said, I wanted to fill in a template using placeholder for personalization. And I just gave it some notes on the tone, which brings us to what you guys have all been waiting for probably is the result of all of our hard work, which is a filled-in email template. And I'll just read it to you guys briefly. Hey, Stuart, which is the first name we retrieved. A friend mentioned Hatch recently, and I've been meaning to reach out. Sounds like you're making big moves. And then here it is followed by the personalization. Congrats on the initiatives related to decarbonization and engineering solutions for the battery life cycle, by the way, which is probably something Hatch is involved with. Well, it must be because it was on their website. Saw you've got some SDR roles open and figured I'd drop you a note. This is the best part of the email because they actually have some jobs open because we verified. So we know they're looking for this. So we know this email is relevant to them. And then we just talk something about ourselves. I run an agency specializing in cold outbound, and we can handle outreach at 50 times the pace of a typical SDR, which is true. There's no human who can compete with a flow like this. Furthermore, with response rates consistently outperforming industry averages, we've helped companies like Bolt and Deliveroo create over 8 million in pipeline. Would love to explore if we could do the same for you. Free for a quick chat this week. Cheers, Clarence. This is one of the best email templates I've ever written, and this is one which works like a charm. I would highly suggest to just copy this one, use it for yourself, and see the positive replies flow in. And let me tell you that using this system completely changed the game for me. Using this exact system, I grew my agency from $0 a month to $35,000 in monthly profits within just 6 months. And the best part of it all is because AI does all the heavy lifting, I now work just 3 to 4 hours a day because this system handles everything. It resulted in me not having to worry about where my next lead or my next payment is coming from because I have a consistent lead which is constantly updating with ready to buy clients who are interested in my services. So if you're tired of outdated methods that waste your time and bring in little to no results, it is time to take action because there are possibilities. You can start by building this automated workflow today and unlock a whole new level of efficiency for your business. If anything was unclear or if you got any questions, drop them in the comments below. I'd love to help you out, dive deeper into any part of the system you're curious about. And hey, if you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss out on actionable strategies to grow your business with automation ever again. I want to thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next video. Thank you. Bye.